I read off 8 guys from John Harbaugh to Mike Tomlin. I even included. Now you're not getting probably Tomlin. I don't know about Harbaugh. I don't know about Sean McVay. And now this week, obviously, Kyle Shanahan's name is kind of whether the Bears are playing him or people are. Why not do something bold and different than what you've done before? Go trade a first-round pick for a coach. Well, what you've done in the past has not worked.
I agree. It takes 2 to tango, though. So, like, I guess the point I would make in conjunction with what you're saying is I would definitely make phone calls. I would call them. But I wouldn't just come to the conclusion that one of these guys is going to be available because you're willing to pay a price for them. And I would also say I'm not as sold that this roster is as complete as maybe others. Yeah. So there has to be a threshold with regard to what I'd be willing to give up. Would I be willing to give up a first-round pick knowing that I'm going to get a couple of high second-round picks? You're going to have the Carolina pick at the beginning of the second round, probably, where their second-round pick's going to be. I don't know. So you still have some draft currency. I wouldn't be giving away a couple of firsts and a couple of seconds. You're not complete enough at this point.
No, I wouldn't either, but it's got to be
I would not be inclined to do it.
See, I would. Stefanski, McVay, Shanahan.
So you'd be inclined to give up 2 firsts and 2 seconds for any of those guys?
No, not that much. I don't know what the number is. I mean,
first of all, I don't think it would take that much. What was the currency that they had to trade for Gruden? Well, Gruden was years ago.
Sean Payton
most recently.
Yeah. It was a first and a second, and I believe they also got a third back.
Yeah, that's right.
For Payton.
Okay, so let's use that example. And Sean Payton had a good reputation, you're right, at the time.
Yeah, he won a Super Bowl.
Right. So McVay, Shanahan, they're all in the same group. Would you give a first, a second, and get back a third for one of these coaches that has had a lot of success?
Who it is. I mean, Stefanski's been a 2-time NFL Coach of the Year, and I think he's a good coach. But he wins those awards because the association is reluctant to give it to Andy Reid.
Right, of course.
Or, one of the other coaches in the league. That award is usually given to a coach who's gotten more out of his team than many expected.
Here's my point. And I want to get people's take on this and yours. 312-332-3776. And I said I'm going to bring up baseball. I mentioned Grafal. I'm going to bring up David Ross now and Craig Counsell. David Ross was okay. He was growing into the job, right? He didn't get fired for any specific one thing. But they knew that Ross wasn't fully formed as a manager. He hadn't checked every box. So they went out and got a guy that did. Well, it remains to be seen. He'll be successful, but on paper he does, Craig Counsell. And so for the next 4 years, after 5 total, but 4 years, they've checked that coaching box off. They don't have to worry about it. That's what I want the Bears to do. Ben Johnson might be the next Hall of Fame coach, but I don't want to have to wonder. And yes, every situation should be taken for itself in the moment that you're in. But I'm sorry, the history of the Bears with these first-time coaches has not gone well. Check off that box for the next 5 years. Get me McVay. Get me Shanahan. Get me Stefanski. Maybe Mike Vrabel.
Vrabel's a different story because you're not going to have to give up compensation for him.
Well, I said maybe.
You could scream at Jed York and John Lynch all you want, but if they're not interested in letting Kyle Shanahan go, you're not. Okay. Also, you can't go out to the Bay Area and kidnapping.
No, 100%. Although Carmen Yurko could do that, bring him back with him. But here's the point. If Monday, there were only 3 things that stood out to me in that press conference. I didn't think the press conference was as bad as a lot of other people thought. I didn't. But the fact that he said exhaustive search, now we should hold them to that. That as long as they're calling McVay or his bosses, as long as they're calling Shanahan, Stefanski, if you like him, and as long as they're calling them, then at least they're doing that search that they've promised.
I'm fine with all of that.
So make those calls.
Absolutely.
And don't be a second-round pick and a first. No, it's worth it. It's worth it. How many times do we have to recycle through these first-time coaches and it doesn't work? And granted, they might hit on one. Ben Johnson, again, might. But I'm tired of might.
So Ben Johnson's not on your list?
Not anymore. I don't want.
You just want a guy.
I want a guy
that has been a head coach before.
Yes.
I think and I just have a different perspective. I don't think you can close the door on anybody. I don't think you can.
My first choice is
would not do it.
my first choice is training. There's 8 coaches that have been in their clubs for 5 or more years. Someone, 8 good ones, will have run its course. I don't care if it's John Harbaugh, Stefanski, McVay, Shanahan, one of those. Like, you're not getting Tomlin probably, but there's 8 of them. I was listening to them the other day.
I would just not assume that all of those teams are going to be with. There's a reason why you want those guys.
But you know how,
right? Isn't there a reason why? It's like you're not looking for Zach Taylor, right? You're not calling them.
You're not
calling the Jags for Doug Peterson.
All right, Taylor's been to the Super Bowl. I don't mind him too much. I mean, look. Beggars can't be choosers here. Let's.
So you're going to give compensation to the Bengals for
a lot
Zach
less,
Taylor?
a lot less for Taylor. I'd at least investigate. I'm not smart
I'm
enough.
not poo-pooing your thought that you should call every team and you should turn over every rock. I would just say I think it's short-sighted to close the door on others who have never been given the job. You know, like Mike Tomlin, when the Steelers hired him, he had never done it before.
Agreed.
When Sean McVay was hired by the Rams, he had never done it before. When Matt LaFleur was hired by the Packers, he had never done it before. When Kevin O'Connell was hired by the Vikings, he had never done it before.
When Matt Nagy was hired by the Bears, he had never done it before.
That's right,
When
Jess,
Matt Eberflus was hired by the Bears, he had never done it before.
Get it right. Why did the other teams get it right? And you got it wrong consistently because you have inside your building an ineffective and an unsuccessful path to finding the right guy to lead your team.
And nothing they've shown it feels any different. So why not take that ineffective path and eliminate it by hiring someone that already has a resume?
Okay, but Jess, you are just assuming that guy's going to be available. I consent to your opinion that you should call these guys.
I think you should call them first. You call all those guys first, and then you call Ben Johnson.
First of all, you can't call the 49ers and talk to Jed York about Kyle Shanahan
after the
with
season.
5 games left in the season.
I'm saying after the season. After the season.
I just wouldn't be all invested in that this is going to work. I'm not denying it's a path you shouldn't pursue. But it sounds to me like it's all or nothing. And if you get a no from all the guys you've listed, then what are you going to do?
Well, then you call Ben Johnson, or Vrabel, or, you do, obviously.
Well, I thought Ben Johnson wasn't on your list.
But my point is, the Bears have never taken the approach that I'm suggesting. They've never gone aggressive after someone that's won.
They've never done it right in any way, shape, or form.
Right. So, like Potash tweeted out, if what you've done so far hasn't worked, maybe try the opposite, which is, again, the George Costanza theory.
That's fine, but I'll go back and say that we could attach that to everything. Hey, how about getting the president of your organization, your general manager, your head coach, and your quarterback all on the same timeline?
Yeah.
It's never been done.
Yeah.
So I could pound my fist on the table and say the same thing about any number of things that have gone on up there. They have never done it in a manner in which it has resulted in consistent success. If they had done things in this unorthodox manner and it consistently provided you winning football, then I'd just put my hands in the air and go, listen, there's a method to your madness.
Of course.
There's no method to their madness.
Right.
So, I could say, hey, let's do it differently as my mantra, and that's great, but it just sounds like a platitude to me.
Yeah, I guess what I'm saying is...
I'm not poo-pooing your suggestion.
No, I know you're not.
I would call the 49ers at the end of the season. I would call the Rams about McVay at the end of the season. I call them all.
That's all I'm asking.
But you've also closed the door on anybody else that has never been a head coach in the National Football League. And I'm just saying to you, I'd be careful with that approach because you may eliminate guys who could turn out to be the next McVay or the next O'Connell.
I'm trying not to say I'd put all my eggs in that basket, but I know what you're saying. If I make that the priority, I might lose on someone else. So not only am I saying make that a priority, but maybe you do push that draft compensation a little bit further. So I am in that aggressive camp of doing that.
You become more willing to do something like that than you ever have in your history of your organization. Because I can't imagine that the Bears in modern times have ever been comfortable with even the thought of giving up draft compensation for a coach. Because you know what ends 100%. Up happening? Not only are you going to be giving up draft compensation for one of these accomplished head coaches, it comes with a huge price tag. And that's also something that they have shied away from.
100% agree, which is why I brought this up.
We're talking in the same circle here. I'm with you. You can't not make this call based on what it's going to cost you, because the cost of a coach doesn't affect your salary cap. And it's pennies on the dollars with regard to what the asset's actually valued at. So you can't make this decision if you're up at Hallis Hall based on money, and you can't make the decision on whether or not the personality of the new head coach makes you a little uncomfortable in the building. Football's an uncomfortable sport. I'm not talking about bringing in an asshat or somebody that's a jerk or a horrible person, but if for whatever reason this person has, kind of a gruff predisposition, he's got a Mike Ditka attitude or a Mike Vrabel personality.
Jim Harbaugh.
You cannot be afraid to go down that road because that personality makes you and others in the facility a little uncomfortable.
And that would be, again, doing something different. And that's the main point of this whole rant by me.
And here, this is what you could have had Jim Harbaugh without ever having to give up any type of draft compensation.
Which makes me leery of them actually doing this, because all those guys do have aggressive A-type personalities, which makes them good. I saw someone tweet out, I think the McCaskies just have PTSD from the Ditka era, and they're not going to hire anyone close to that sort of.
Well, if you
vibe.
use that, if you close the door on that for that reason, then
You're screwed.
Yeah.